All right, so, you sent over some really fascinating stuff about uh, Dalit literature,
Hmm.
and we're going to try and take a deep dive into it today.
Sounds great.
It's really, I think, more than just literature. It's like, getting into some lived experiences and
Hmm.
some really, struggles for equality and things like that within Indian society. So
Yeah, absolutely.
it's going to be pretty fascinating, I think.
Yeah, and Dalit literature is such a powerful. I mean, it's the expression of a community that has faced, historically, uh, so much embedded discrimination,
Right.
oppression, caste-based oppression
Hmm.
in India, and it really is a lens for anyone to understand the kind of complexities
Yeah.
of Indian society, both past and present.
Yeah, and we've got like six writers here from the sources that you sent over that we're going to dive into.
Okay.
And we're going to look at, like some of the most powerful books and their poems and what makes them so important.
Yes.
What makes their writing so important for understanding India. So,
The mission is to really extract.
the core wisdom from these writers and what they're saying and giving you a really good understanding of, their contributions
Yeah.
and the Dalit movement as a whole.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get started with B.R. Ambedkar.
Okay.
He was born in 1891,
Yeah.
died in 1956. This guy was like a huge
Yeah. Giant.
figure in the whole Dalit movement, like a
Yeah.
thinker and a lawyer and a leader and just
Yeah, absolutely. A key intellectual force, I would say,
yeah.
for the Dalit movement.
So, I mean, just some of his works here, like Annihilation of Caste and Who Were the Shudras and the Buddha and his Dhamma. I
Right.
mean, these are like major
Huge works.
works.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like let's start with Annihilation of Caste.
Okay.
I mean, just the title itself.
Very powerful.
Yeah, it's a statement.
Yeah.
So what is he saying in this book?
Well, he really argues against the idea that the caste system is just a,
Right.
division of labor. Like some people would argue it's more of a like a brutal division of laborers,
Yeah.
It's inherently unequal.
And exploitative in its structure. And he really advocates for the complete eradication of the caste system.
Wow.
And he offers some ideas as to how that can be achieved.
So then there's who are the Shudras? This is going way back into the history.
Yeah, so this one goes deep into the historical context
Yeah.
of the Shudras. And really, he challenges the dominant narrative surrounding the origins of the Shudras
Okay.
and how they came to be and their status in society.
Okay, so and then the last one here is the Buddha and his Dhamma. So this is taking a totally different direction.
Yes, very different.
What's this one about?
So this one, he really finds in Buddhism a philosophy and a religion that champions equality
Okay.
in a way that, stands in contrast to the hierarchy of the caste system.
Oh, okay.
So he kind of gives you a reinterpretation of Buddhist teachings through a modern lens,
Interesting. Okay.
highlighting these core principles of, social justice and individual dignity.
Wow. And so this is like just a few of the things that he was writing about. He also wrote a lot about law and history and economics.
Yeah, you wrote extensively.
Really, like his whole life was dedicated to like
It seems like all of his intellectual energy was driving towards this equitable vision of society.
Yes, and his impact is just you can't even
Yeah, it's hard to overstate
understate it. Yeah.
his significance. He's arguably the biggest name in the Dalit movement.
Right.
His role in drafting the Indian Constitution was massive.
Huge.
Enshrining those fundamental rights and actually abolishing untouchability
Right.
through Article 17. I mean, that's a major achievement.
Yeah, I mean that's shaping the fabric of India.
Absolutely.
Right.
And his books, they really give Dalits a way to understand
Yeah.
their oppression and to fight for their rights.
Okay, so let's move on to Prakash Valmiki.
Okay.
He lived from 1950 to 2013, and his autobiography, Juthan, came out in 1997. And this is a really powerful book.
Very powerful.
Juthan means leftovers, right?
Yes. Chillingly translates to leftovers.
Yeah, and it's just a very honest look at his life growing up as a Dalit in Uttar Pradesh.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a ground level view of
Yeah.
that daily discrimination
Yeah.
and the shame and the pain that comes with that.
Yeah, there's that one example where he's forced to eat leftovers.
Yes.
And that's just like,
That's like epitomizes the dehumanization of untouchability.
yeah, it's just this awful practice. And
Yeah.
he talks about so many instances of this discrimination in his life. And then his other writings, too, his poems and short stories,
Right.
really show, this Dalit experience in a really powerful way.
Right. A raw honesty
Yeah.
in a lot of his work.
So what do you think his impact was on literature?
Well, I think he's really important because he brought these Dalit experiences to the forefront
Right.
of Hindi literature, which had really ignored these perspectives.
Yeah.
Before him and Juthan got a lot of recognition.
Yeah.
It was translated into many languages.
Wow.
And he really encouraged other Dalit writers to share their stories.
Right.
Which fostered a more inclusive literary space.
Okay, great. So let's move on to Namdeo Dhasal.
Yeah.
He lived from 1949 to 2014, and he was a poet, but he was also the founder of the Dalit Panthers.
Yes.
So a very politically active person as well. And his collection of poems, Golpitha, from 1972, is like a landmark work.
Yes. It's striking for its bold and angry tone.
Yeah, and he talks about like the Mumbai slums
and these really impoverished areas.
Yeah, and he uses really strong language and imagery.
Yes,
yeah.
Very powerful imagery to depict these struggles.
Yeah, so his poems were like a confrontation with unfairness.
Absolutely.
They depicted this pain endured by the Dalits and other marginalized groups.
Right. It's not just passive documentation. It's a call to action, a call for change.
So he was a real revolutionary.
Yeah, absolutely. A rebel figure.
Yeah.
Challenging those norms and really making people look at these uncomfortable truths.
Yeah. And then with the Dalit Panthers, he was really active in, fighting for rights.
Yeah, fighting for Dalit rights on the ground.
Okay, so now we've got Bama.
Okay.
Who was born in 1958, and her Tamil autobiography, Kuruku, came out in 1992.
Yes.
And Kuruku means the sharp edges of palmyra leaves, which is a very interesting title.
Yeah, it's symbolic of her experiences.
Yeah, so she was a Dalit Christian woman,
so
facing kind of a double
discrimination.
Yeah. And she talks about her life in her village and her experiences in the church.
Right.
And her own personal struggles.
And she questions those inequalities.
Yeah.
Both societal and religious.
So what was our writing style like?
It was simple, but profound.
Okay.
Very emotionally resonant.
Okay. And how important was her work?
Well, she was really groundbreaking in highlighting the suffering of Dalit women.
Right.
Whose experiences were often overlooked.
Yeah.
And she brought a really new perspective to Tamil literature. And her work helped people to understand intersectionality.
Okay.
How these different social categories can create different forms of oppression.
Okay, and she's had a big influence on other writers.
Yeah, she's influenced a lot of Dalit women writers who came after her.
Okay, so next we have Urmila Pawar, who was born in 1945, and her autobiography, Aidan, was published in 2003.
Yes.
And it's also known as The Weave of My Life in English.
Right.
And Aidan actually means weaving.
It does.
So it's like her life story.
Yeah, a metaphor for her life story.
Right. And she talks about poverty and hard labor, but also her journey of becoming educated.
Yes.
And empowered.
It's a really powerful story.
Yeah. And she also tells stories about other Dalit women.
Yes. She focuses on their lives,
Right.
Showing the pain and the hope.
And her writing is really clear and emotional.
Very clear.
Yeah.
And very emotionally resonant.
So what was her impact?
Well, she gave a voice to Dalit women.
Right.
And showed their strength and their challenges.
Yeah.
And she contributed to the understanding of the connection between caste and gender.
Okay, so finally we have Sharan Kumar Limbale, born in 1956, and his book, Akarmashi, came out in 1984.
Yes.
It's also known as The Outcast.
Right.
And it's an autobiographical work about his experience of being born to a Dalit mother.
Yes.
And an upper caste father.
A very unique perspective.
Yeah, so he was kind of caught between these two worlds.
Exactly.
And he really explores this feeling of confusion and pain, and he really questions the whole meaning of caste.
Right, he questions these rigid boundaries.
Yeah, and his writing is very honest.
Very honest.
Thought-provoking.
Yes.
So why is his perspective so important?
Well, it reveals those complexities of caste identity.
Right.
It's not always so clear-cut.
Right.
And his story is unique, but it's also important because it shows how these boundaries can affect people.
Yeah, it's a very specific perspective, but it adds to the whole.
It adds to the richness of Dalit literature.
Yeah. Okay, so we've looked at all these writers now.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the reasons why these voices matter so much?
Well, they share those authentic Dalit stories. Stories of pain and resilience.
Right.
And they challenge the caste system head on.
Yeah.
They're advocating for equality, and they show how caste intersects with other issues like gender and religion.
Right.
They've inspired other Dalits to speak out, and they've really enriched Indian literature.
Yeah. So for you listening, I think, reading these writers will give you an amazing
Yeah,
view of India
absolutely.
and really show you what the fight for justice is like.
Yeah, they offer firsthand accounts, and they really analyze
Hmm.
the complexities of Indian society.
So this has been a really interesting deep dive
Yeah, it has.
into Dalit literature, and I think we've learned that this literature is just so important.
Yeah,
It's a way to understand marginalized experiences
absolutely.
and to really see the need for social change.
Yes, and
Yeah.
their stories teach us about
Yeah.
discrimination and the fight for equality.
So I think a question for you listening is,
Yeah.
how do you think these hierarchies and prejudices that we've talked about, how do they operate in the world today, even in different contexts?
That's a good question.
Yeah, and how can we amplify marginalized voices
Right.
to make the world a more just and equitable place?
It's something to think about.
Yeah.
Because these insights go beyond just caste in India.
Great.
They make us look at the power structures
Mm-hmm.
and the inequalities in our own world.
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening.
It's been a pleasure.
And we'll see you next time.
All right, see you then.